presentation is going to be is an enlistment of Extenet. Not originally on the agenda, but they did ask if they could make a quick presentation. And they're going to put up, or they're proposing a variety of low-power 4G LTE antennas in our neighborhood. So, take it away.
Great, thank you, Ford. Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Ricardo Souza. This is my associate Dan Glissman, and we're from the law firm of Prince Lobel-Tie, 100 Cambridge Street. We're here on behalf of the petitioner, Extenet Systems. And we're really here because everybody's using their iPhones and their iPads way too much. So the bottom line is the wireless networks that allow those devices to operate are just getting way overloaded. So what the wireless carriers have done is they've found a way to supplement these wireless networks, the macro wireless networks that exist on rooftops, large towers, church steeples, by coming up with a new technology called DAS, Distributed Antenna Systems. And they're building these wireless DAS networks in various cities, typically dense urban environments where the data usage and the phone usage is through the roof. And the only way to help supplement those wireless networks so that phone calls don't start dropping, and so that data usage continues to be reliable, is by building these DAS networks utilizing the city's infrastructure, traffic poles and streetlights in particular. And so about 10 years ago, three companies, Extenet Systems, ATC Outdoor DAS, which is American Tower, and Crown Castle, entered into a license agreement, a franchise agreement really, with the city of Boston to be able to utilize its public rights of way and its infrastructure to put up these small, low-powered antenna units on top of those streetlights and traffic poles. And so Extenet Systems, really since about 2007, because it took us a while to get through the process, operates about 40 of these units, mostly in the Back Bay. Most of them actually in the Back Bay Architectural Commission, where there was the biggest need. We also have a few that have been approved in the financial district. And so we work with all the various city agencies to get the design approved. And then once we get it approved by Boston Street Lighting or BTD, whoever owns the structure for the city of Boston, then we take it through the Public Improvement Commission. And that's sort of the jurisdictional board that controls any work in the public right of way. And so these installations involve, in most cases, utilizing the existing streetlights. Many of these streetlights are the old 1960s or 1970 sort of concrete-looking streetlights that you see. And so what we do is we work with the Boston Street Lighting Department, and we take out the old ones and we replace them with new ones that are made of steel but look identical to the original ones. In fact, they make us put a Zolatone finish on it that makes it look just like the original. And then we place an antenna node at the top, which is about 24 inches tall, and then a radio cabinet about 2/3 of the way up. And that's sort of the basis of the installation. Here in the north end, we've identified 21 streetlights that we'd like to utilize for purposes of these installations. And as Ford suggested, these really are low-powered. They are fairly small, but they do help supplement that macro wireless network that exists now, but that is getting overloaded. For example, if you went to a particular rooftop, a commercial rooftop that had a Verizon or an AT&T wireless installation, they would have each carrier would have up to 12 panel antennas. Each panel antenna would be about 4 to 5 feet tall, and they would have about 4 to 5 radio cabinets that look like refrigerators. So those are your macro sites. That's sort of the baseline of how we build a wireless network. And these are much smaller. They just help supplement that existing wireless network. But they do provide 4G LTE service, which is the newest technology in wireless. And it's both for data and voice. One of the things that's happened lately is that, I would say 6 or 7 years ago, you would have 6 times more voice calls than data calls. But now through social media, everybody's communicating more through texting and social media than actually calling folks. You probably have noticed that in your everyday world. And so instead, the data networks are getting overloaded. And so they're putting a huge stress on the wireless networks, and companies like Extenet are able to supplement those networks with these small installations. So that's the basis of why we're here. Yes, sir.
Where can we look at some of these units that have actually been installed? You mentioned that there are a bunch of back there.
Yeah, so if you go on NEWRA Street, at every intersection on NEWRA Street, there are 9 intersections. You will see a street light that has one of those antenna nodes on there. Yep. So NEWRA Street, Beacon Street, almost every intersection. Boylston Street, if you go, we actually utilize traffic signals there. If you start at Dartmouth Street and you go all the way to Mass Ave, almost every intersection there has them. So they're everywhere. Crown Castle has about 100 of these in both Charlestown, Fenway area. So there are quite a few.
Can I ask you,
So Beacon Hill does not have any yet, but we have plans to go to Beacon Hill.
We have the same design as installed along the Beacon Hill, so they match.
I unfortunately don't know what Beacon Hill is going to require us to do, to tell you the truth. So we haven't filed with them yet. Yeah, we're not sure what they're going to ask for us yet. Yes?
how does the economic arrangement work for the city? I mean, I assume there's nothing that's going to promote free Wi-Fi for residents.
Yeah, so the city has built, it's my understanding it's built, or it's in the process of building its own free Wi-Fi service. It's called Wicked Wi-Fi. I'm not sure how extensive it is, to tell you the truth, but there is remuneration from these companies to the city of Boston. So when we enter into a license agreement, we pay an annual fee per node, but we also pay them a revenue share rent to the city of Boston as well. So there is revenue going from Extenet systems to the city of Boston to be able to utilize their
Is
infrastructure.
there equal access for all carriers to this?
Yes, there is. So the great thing about this technology is it's a neutral host DAS. So you may or may not have heard it. If you're a techie, there are small cells and there are DAS installations. The DAS, which is what we're providing, is neutral host, which means any of the 4 major carriers could utilize this antenna installation. In fact, the Back Bay, we have 3 tenants, 3 of the 4 carriers. These particular ones are being sponsored by Verizon. That's our first tenant that is looking for relief here in the North End. Yes,
How large
sir.
are these things? I mean, just,
So the, yeah, it's hard to see, and I'm going to leave some for anybody who wants to take them home and to take a look at the nodes. But the antennas themselves are 24 inches tall above the street light. So the street light itself won't be any taller. We will literally take out the old one, put a new one in, exactly the same height, and then it will be 24 inches above that. With respect to the traffic structures, and right now we're not ready to file the traffic structures into the PIC. We are ready to file with street lighting because Boston Street Lighting has signed off on our design, and all of our other nodes are street lights. The traffic structures are a new design. BTD is working with us through our engineering department to get those approved. We're not ready to file those yet, but in that case, we have to be above the traffic elements. As you can imagine, from a public safety perspective, they want us away from the actual traffic lights themselves. So those will be taller. Those will go from, I believe it's 11 feet to 21 feet and 13 feet to 21 feet.
you're putting these only on the old, on the 1960s.
You've tried.
I'm thinking, in front of my house, on the 540 Commercial Street.
Right.
Literally, yesterday, a new light went up. I mean, it's a pleasure. There was this thing that, like a metal box up there.
Right.
The wind would blow. Now that it's old-fashioned looking, much nicer. The light is much better. I mean, it's a big plus what they put up there. But
Yeah.
you're not thinking of anything on top of those kind of things, are you?
Yeah, so one of the installations is right on Commercial Street. And I know along Commercial Street, all of those old lights have been replaced by the new black poles. Right, with a square luminaire. And it's also, the City of Boston Street Lighting has also started to replace all the old street lights with the LED luminaires.
That's what it is, isn't it?
It is.
Much brighter than
It's
before.
much brighter and it's more energy efficient.
It's a pleasure.
It's much better. And so we have one installation where that involves that particular type of pole, and our antenna will be put on top and it will be painted black.
It's a big plus.
Yeah.
we see much better across, I love the picture from the ballpark, in the ballpark.
Okay.
And you can see much better than, you always had like a shadiness at nighttime, I mean,
Yeah.
people wandering around, what's going on? But now
Right.
you can see it much better.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Plus,
I agree.
Who came up with this whole thing?
Yeah, I can't take credit for the luminaire. I wish I could. Yes, yeah.
Does the antenna go on top of that?
No, maybe I can get.
Yes, I'm sorry,
Yes.
sir. Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
let me just clear this up. You work for Verizon, right?
I do not.
Well, wait a minute. Well, who's paying you? And who, how does this work?
Extenet Systems is paying me. So they are an infrastructure company. So they will own the actual infrastructure itself. The infrastructure is the antenna node. So Verizon will lease space within that antenna node to be able to provide coverage.
Okay, if I
So
don't
they're
have
gonna be
Verizon,
attached.
if I don't have Verizon, does it work?
Eventually it will. So
Eventually?
That's if they contract with your product. That
Correct.
doesn't, it's not a guarantee.
It's not a
So
guarantee.
if a company decides they don't want to contract with your product, that necessarily doesn't mean we get service. It means whoever has chosen to contract gets service.
That's right.
It's not a blanket, everybody with a cell phone has it. It's only people who have contracted with you get that service. So Verizon, AT&T, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. Yep. And in the back bay, 3 of those 4 carriers are on our existing nodes. And we're extending that network now. We're about to file.
Who's not on?
Verizon's not on the back bay. And so we're extending that network to support Verizon. So we fully anticipate that the other carriers have the same problem. For example, AT&T and Verizon, they're about the same as far as market share. So I have to think that AT&T is going to utilize these nodes. We feel very comfortable about that.
So within the city of Boston, every carrier at some point has taken part in this project, correct?
In our infrastructure, yes.
Okay.
That's exactly right. In fact, we had Metro PCS at one point. Then when they merged with T-Mobile, we just now have T-Mobile. But we have Sprint on there and we have AT&T. Yes.
So you and American Tower, and you said one other, are on this project, so is that right?
No, it's very complicated. So as far as who are the licensees, who are the 3 companies that have the right to utilize the city's streetlights and traffic poles? And that is Crown Castle, American Tower, and Extenet. So we're the 3 companies that are neutral host companies. We build infrastructure so that the carriers can be our tenants. And right now, as far as with the city of Boston, we're the only 3 companies that have a franchise agreement with the city. And so once we build our installation, then we will continue to market it to the 4, there are really only 4 major wireless carriers, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile. And they will utilize our antenna node to supplement their wireless network.
So if Verizon doesn't get on board in Back Bay, then could American Tower take some other poles and have these things?
Yes.
And then Verizon will say, I'll go with them, so we could have more of these everywhere than we would?
You could, and that's the benefit of a neutral host. So we can accommodate up to 4 carriers on these nodes. So you want to try to go with a neutral host. I'm not aware of any small cell companies who are just building for themselves. This is really technology that can accommodate all 4. And so you want to try to, and I think that's why the city entered into license agreements with neutral host companies so that we would have fewer of these who could accommodate all 4 carriers.
But Extenet's, to clarify that question, Extenet has the exclusive on the North End territory. We're not going to see Crown Castle or American Tower come in and present in a subsequent meeting an overlay that says, well, our towers are going to be here, or our light posts, or whatever. You guys are the North End neutral carrier for Boston, or could we see more?
I don't think the city has done that, honestly, for it. The city has not carved out. The companies have.
Okay.
The companies do not go into each other's territories. For example, neither Crown Castle is not in where we are in the Valley Architectural Commission. They know that's covered already, so they're going into Charleston.
Right.
Okay,
The economics.
and we don't believe they're going to come into the North End.
But these
But the city of Boston, just to be clear, the city of Boston has not redlined the districts and said, Extenet, you have North End. That has not happened.
the players are the same as the tower players. So, you know, Crown Castle, American Tower are 2 of the larger, and oftentimes, you know, cell phone companies don't own that tower. They're the same third parties, same
Right.
kind of business model. you'll often see two cell towers right next to one another. Because American Tower and Crown Castle will say, hey, that's a good mountaintop, but what's to prevent that from happening here?
Yeah, so I think in the old days you used to see that. You don't see it anymore. Because you used to have 7 wireless carriers. There's been a huge consolidation. There's only 4 now. There's been a lot of mergers. And so you very rarely see any spec towers built. And you very rarely see a tower next to each other. Typically it's one and accommodates all 4. And you have the right to say, I think that the next applicant, no, Extenet system seems like it's covered all of the north end. You prove to us that Extenet is not allowing you to go on their installation. I think you have every right to do that.
Can I ask one question? And I know there are a lot of other questions, I'm sorry to, but one thing I'm concerned about is power. And can you tell us how much power it goes in, well, how much transmission, wattage is coming out of each of these things, and what percentage of a cell tower that is? Is it like 0.1% or is it 20%?
Yeah, so they all do have to comply with the FCC limitations on power output and radio frequency emissions. So each of these installations is filed with the FCC to make sure it's well within the limits.
Each particular lamp post?
Each particular lamp post, each node has to be filed with the FCC. And typically they come below 1% of the maximum limit set by the FCC. And it's all different because it depends on what signal it's bouncing off of, how close it is to a building. And so I can't tell you the exact
But
ERP.
a typical one that you're running in Back Bay?
As far as pure power, we're talking anywhere between 40 and 250 watts.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's pretty low.
Yeah. So, people worry about high tension lines. Those are 50,000 watts.
Right.
There's a huge difference.
So, is there any differentiation between cell antennas that are on towers and on top of roofs, and these antennas are very close to the county, and theoretically people will be more exposure?
There's a huge difference in the sense that there's a lot more power coming out of an installation that's on the rooftop.
How much? Say 250 for these antennas. What would a typical rooftop antenna?
Well, first of all, you typically have 12 antennas, so there's more antenna nodes. They're all oriented in a 3 sectors, so per sector there's a certain amount of power that's going out. I would say it's 4 times as much on per sector than what you see here. I'm a lawyer, I apologize, I don't have the exact wattage or power output, but I can provide that support if you'd like.
Has it been studied, has it been looked into, the exposure in this smaller capacity on people walking
Yes.
by at a daily basis? I walk out my door every morning to go do this or that. Has it been studied where someone having exposure to it? Has that been looked into at all? Or looking at, what if you live on the 2nd floor and it lines up directly with your window and you sit there every night to watch TV? Has that been looked into at all?
Yes, by both the FCC, the World Health Organization, it probably has hundreds of these studies on its website relative to the power output of wireless installations. And in addition to that, the FCC requires the carriers themselves, I should say the infrastructure companies, to file a notice for each of these node installations to make sure it falls well below those limits set by the FCC.
What restrictions do you have as to which light post you can put these on, in terms of design and design quality?
Yeah, so all of the light posts, except for that one on Commercial Street, are all the same old style cantilevered light. They all look like this.
They're not the acorn type?
They're not acorn, that's right. So that's a very good point. Yeah, we're restricted. We cannot utilize acorn lights. We cannot use the terminology in the license agreement. We cannot utilize ornamental lights. So if there's any ornamental light, simply they're off limits. Yes, and unfortunately they're changing over, unfortunately for us, fortunately for you, they're changing over all those. So we cannot, those are off limits for us. No, I'm sorry, they changed them over from the old style light to a much more aesthetic light. So, yeah, we cannot use those.
Are you licensed for each individual installation, or do you get a blanket license through non-governmental? And second question related is, what's the nature of the license? Is it time? I assume it's time. How long?
Yep. So to answer your first question, both. So we have an omnibus franchise agreement, that sets forth the terms and conditions of the arrangement between Extenet and the City of Austin. And then every time we go to the PIC, and the PIC approves individual lights, we enter into a specific license agreement for those specific nodes that identify specifically which ones we can go on and which ones we can't. And then as far as the term, these are 10-year terms. Franchise agreement. And the city is about to increase the rates. I can tell you that. Yes,
Who's responsible for maintaining these new lighting?
we are. So if anybody crashes into any of these, they're our responsibility under our license agreement. We're the ones who have to pay for the fixing. We pay for our own electricity. There's only 2 utilities that come into these lights. It's power and telephone signal in the form of fiber. And we pay for that.
Technology moves so fast, what's gonna happen? Do you have in your contract a bond that requires you to take these down after new technology comes, or will it be like the pay phones that just sit there forever?
Yeah.
Nobody takes them down, they just, what's gonna happen with your, do you have it in your contract?
I believe there's a bond. I can't say that for sure, but we have an obligation to remove them. If we're not using them for more than 60 days, we have to remove them. Yep. So as far as what's going to happen in the future, I don't know. Things are getting smaller and smaller. Our iPhones are getting smaller and smaller. You have to think that technology is going to get better and better. But I have not heard of a full replacement of these types of networks. You know, there's a company out there, Light Square, that's working on technology to utilize both satellites and ground-mounted facilities, but they haven't done anything yet.
Did you say how long your contract is?
10 years, 10-year terms. Yes.
Why shouldn't we ask the city and our officials in the PIC to save this valuable real estate above our traffic lights and the street poles for something like the wicked Wi-Fi, that free Wi-Fi that would provide a benefit to the people that live here?
You know, I would suggest that there are enough streetlights. If we're utilizing 20% of the streetlights in the north end, I'd be surprised. There are a lot of vertical elements that the city could utilize, and we're not. It's not as if we're blocking out the city from building its own network.
Could you allow the city to use your installations for their own Wi-Fi? Would there be room for that? Would it be possible to combine it? Because looking at those pictures, they're honestly, they're god-awful. Looking at those things are 2 feet tall, hanging off these lampposts in a historic neighborhood where people walking into the north end of Hanover Street shouldn't have to look at these things. So would it be able to minimize how many of these we have to install? Could the city use these for their own Wi-Fi? Is there a way to kind of do it that way so there's not on every single pole we look at having these huge atrocities on top of them?
Yeah, I'm not sure. This is built more for a wireless carrier, a commercial wireless carrier, and I'm not sure of the nature of the Wi-Fi licenses that the city has, what its technology requirements are, whether or not it's compatible with our technology. I do know there are some. I believe there are some on Commercial Street Wi-Fi units on the cantilever traffic poles right along the Rose Kennedy Greenway and on Commercial Street. Those are owned by the city. And so I believe they're building their own, but I'm not positive about that. Yes?
I know that streetlight poles provide an important function in that oftentimes they're used to light holiday decorations or decorations for things like the feasts.
Yes.
Are your streetlights going to have those same kinds of outlets, and will you continue to let the community use those streetlights for free, even though you're paying for power now instead of the city of Boston?
I can say yes. I mean, I don't know the logistics of how those lights are connected into the power of that pole, but I'm happy to look into it. And I cannot imagine that Extenet would have any objection to that. I would think that Extenet would support that. But I will provide the answer for you. Okay?
So basically, someone from the city or the city decided to do this, and you're just here letting us know that that's what the city's going to do. That's what it is. Right? Like someone from the city decided they're going to do this, and this is a decision.
I would characterize it a little differently. I think it's the wireless carriers and Extenet who would like to do this. They're the ones who brought this technology to the city. In every city around the country, San Francisco, Baltimore, New York City, has hundreds of these gas units so that we can have reliable coverage in an urban environment in particular. So I wouldn't say it's the city that's driving the bus, I would say is Extenet is petitioning to the city pursuant to its license agreement to be able to utilize this infrastructure.
But the city doesn't have to communicate the license?
Yes.
So it's happening.
Contract signed though.
Yeah.
So the contract is signed, but
Yeah.
with all due respect, if we go to the PIC, we go to the PIC, the Public Improvement Commission, and they have the right to approve each of the notes.
So the only thing the city has done is narrow the field of people who can do this to 3 carriers that the city has deemed appropriate, the same way they do with like the cable company, right?
Right.
And the idea is you don't want to have so many disruptions to your public infrastructure, as I'm sure there are, how many companies provide this service?
Many would like to.
Yeah, roughly 100, but only 3 have contracted. So this is the point in the process in which you determine if you want this in your community, because he still doesn't have his permit to actually install any of these. He's just one of the 3 companies the city will allow to install these, based on what you guys want us to see.
So the neighborhood can say no?
But the neighborhood has the right to speak at the PIC, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, so the neighborhood can say you do not support this application at the Public Improvement Commission.
Correct. We haven't filed the PIC yet.
Yeah.
We came here first. So,
My question to you is, are those plans final? Is there any room really to move within these plans? Are the locations set? Are the designs themselves? Can you make the technology smaller? Can you move that massive box that sits under the antenna to underground? Is there any wiggle room in this community to make those less impeding on day-to-day activities, less impeding on the tourist market? Is there any way, or is that just what we're going to get? Either it's that or nothing, or is there any wiggle room?
I would have to say, this is the best configuration driven by Verizon and Extenet to provide reliable service in the North End.
So no.
So, we can do aesthetics, we can paint it a different color. Things like
But you
that.
can't change
We
it.
really can't, we can't change the technology, we can't change the antenna. Believe me, if we could make it smaller, I would make it smaller tomorrow. It is significantly smaller than a macro site, significantly by.
But the
leaps and
macro
bounds.
site's not going on top of the light pole now, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. So the technology is getting smaller. Even in the time that I've been working with Extenet, it's been getting smaller. But you can't make it go away altogether, otherwise it's just, not there. Yes, sir.
If I have AT&T service on my cell phone, I'm not hearing AT&T as a participant in this. It sounds like my service would get better if I had Verizon or.
Yeah, so we think AT&T eventually will join onto our nodes. We really feel strongly about that because they've joined our other nodes in the Back Bay. They just haven't signed on to these yet. I think they're waiting for them to get approved and built. So there's a high likelihood they're going to join. Yes?
Is there any regulation regarding how much you're going to charge Verizon versus?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Like how, is the government at all involved, being that so that it's not a monopoly?
Yeah.
Verizon or something.
So there's a co-location requirement. We can't, and it's actually in our license agreement with the city, where we can't say, no, Sprint, you can't join our wireless installation. But the federal government does not step into the negotiation of rent between Extenet and AT&T. But there's a high likelihood they're going to use these nodes because they use our other nodes. It's not like we're going to charge them 4 times as much here in the North End. These are companies that work together on a daily basis. As I said, the industry has shrunk so much. We only have 4 tenants out there that can utilize our infrastructure, so we're not going to treat them unreasonably.
Well, thank you for telling us about it. So I think, we would very much like to mull this a little bit. If you can answer some of those questions, that would be helpful. It's good to know that we have some, say, and I think we'll be discussing this a little bit more. If people feel strongly that particularly the optical remote unit casing just seems, that's the one, the antenna shroud actually doesn't look that bad compared to many things. But the optical remote casing is huge.
Yeah, that's the radio cabinet.
Right, and if you take a look at FiOS installations, they started big and then in 3 years they were tiny.
Yeah. I've been pushing, for companies to try to get them smaller. They're not listening to me. They feel this is the minimum size they need. We actually have a stealth cover over that, to try to have it blend into the structure better.
Maybe we can figure out a way where folks here in our neighborhood association can help strengthen your voice to Verizon and say, look, or whomever, right, and say, let's pay the street a little bit. But we appreciate your coming in and telling us about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your time.
Remind everyone